Part 329. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3289. Joe Man thought about it, but he didn't hide it from him. I checked your age with the blood of the master, and deduced that you should be between 82 and 87 this year. Luo thought about many possibilities, but I didn't think of this one. How can blood calculate age? He has only heard of the Central Plains medical skills that can estimate the age by touching the bones. He thought they were really alchemy, or cursed with blood. Joe Man stared at him and asked, Master Luo, I wonder if my guess is correct. Luo did not answer this question, but asked, how can you tell your age from blood? Joe Man smiled and did not answer the question. Even when Xiao Yuan asked her, she didn't say anything, let alone Na Luo. Na Luo finally sighed, got up and walked to the window, pushed open the window to see the vast whiteness outside. I will leave Chang'an in 2 days to return to my hometown, although it is not my original wish to leave, nor is it very happy, but it's a pleasure to meet someone like Mr. Zhou. He turned his head to look at Joe Man, his eyes fell on her belly, his hands were folded together, he bowed and saluted, and after saying the Buddha's name, he said, May my Buddha bless Master Zhou, mother and child, and have a smooth life. Joe Man hurriedly got up and returned the salute, Thank you, Master. Although this is the first time I have come to Dajin, I know a lot about Dajin. The ministers in the court are all men, like Master Zhou, you are the only one, Na Luo said, you are very worthy of admiration. It is admirable that your majesty can make you a female official, but in 100 years from his majesty, the next king will still use you. Will you treat you like this? The warm smile on Joe Man's face faded, and he sighed, what does the master mean? I don't mean anything else, I just feel sorry for the future of Lord Zhou. After all, there are very few people with skills like you, Na Luo said, even in Dajin, there are very few talents like Lord Zhou. Bar. Joe Man nodded, indeed. Then Luo paused and said, don't you worry about the future, Lord Zhou. Joe Man shook his head, don't worry, I have an official title now. If the next emperor doesn't let me be an official, then I will feel at ease as my county master. It's not my intention to worship the minister, and the landscape is more comfortable. Joe Man is now not poor, very rich, and has medical skills. Even if he is not an official one day, his income will not be less. As for the dignity, she has been sealed as the princess now, does she still lack status? Narrow. Joe Man already knew what Na Luo meant, and said goodbye, Master Luo, it's getting late, today is a farewell, I'm afraid I won't be able to see you off when you leave the city. Na Luo Sao sent Joe Man to the door, and the warrior monk who followed behind couldn't help but said, she really doesn't seem to care. Na Luo turned the Buddha beads and said, it was just a try, it's natural to be good, and we have no loss if it doesn't work. Daji helped Joe Man to the carriage, and waited for the carriage to go out for a while before saying, Madam, is this monk trying to sow discord? Joe Man gave a hum and said indifferently, don't worry, it's just a foreign monk. His Majesty sent him back to the country, and he has no power in Dajin. She turned her head to look at Chang'an, who was wrapped in silver clothes outside the window, and said in a daze, and with such a heavy snow and such a cold day, it is a question whether he can return to Tianzhu alive. Na Luo Sapo quietly left Chang'an. No one went to see him off that day. The carriages and horses of Honglu Temple left the city in a low-key manner, and went north in a low-key manner. The Zhou family was busy with the housewarming, and Joe Man was also busy, so when he heard this, he just nodded and glanced north. The county house has been repaired, the stripped pillars and doors have been repainted, carved, and the roof has been overhauled. The furniture was added to her by the Dianzhong province and the Ministry of Industry in accordance with the regulations of the county master. Because of Gu Zhong's relationship, the things that the Dianzhou province gave to Zhou Man were the best within the regulations. For example, in a carriage, there are 4 shires and 4 princesses, but there is a big difference between horses and horses. The 4 horses given to Zhou Man in the hall are not only similar in color, but also very tall and spirited. The frame looks the same size, but the material used is different. Sheiying logo and bead strings are engraved with the name of Yueyang on both sides and the front and rear of the carriage. Not to mention the inside, which is padded with fine fur, and can hold a lot of things under the belly of the car. There are hidden drawers on both sides, and the wood is very thick. The provincial waiter who came to deliver the car bent over and smiled, said, "The princess of the county, with such a thick car wall, ordinary bows and arrows cannot be shot through. It is a good car to prevent assassination." Zhou Man, a long experience. In addition to the car, there are some furniture in the house. According to the rules, there are not many of these things, but as long as there are, it is the best part of the regulations that the palace can come up with. Not to mention Zhou Man, even Mrs. Lu couldn't help but praise, "These woods are very good." The rest have to be purchased by themselves, such as bookshelves, boga shelves, and the like. Mrs. Lu took the Zheng family all over the capital to find suitable furniture for Zhou Man. If she couldn't find it, she ordered someone to make it. They used high-quality wood and carpentry, and it cost a lot. Zhou Man gave Mrs. Lu a box of money. Mrs. Lu looked at it with a funny look. "You can take the money yourself, the family has money." She pulled Zhou Man and said with a smile, "There is no child who is more worry-free than you. Except for the first 2 years in Qingzhou, you will ask your family for some money, and then you will no longer ask your family for money. Those industries in your family. All the proceeds are collected by you, so why don't you wait for it at this time?" Zhou Man smiled embarrassedly, "Grandma, we have been working for so many years, and we haven't handed it over to the house yet, and we still ask Grandma for money from time to time. Stupid boy, all the money in the family is earned for you. I also dislike that you use less. In addition to furniture, there are ornaments, and when all these are done, Zhou Man starts to move some things in an orderly manner. Like things in the library. These things are extremely important, not only books, but also a lot of Zhou Man and Bai Shan's various notes, so Zhou Man doesn't let anyone interfere. She packs it up by herself, and has people move it one by one, and then another one put the volumes on the bookshelf. The Zhou family helped organize other things. They accepted Zhou Man's move to the county master's mansion well, mainly because they heard that living in the county master's mansion was very honorable, and his status had risen a lot, so although they were reluctant, they still I think it's a good thing that Zhou Man lives in the county master's mansion. Not all things have been moved. Zhou Man still left a lot of things in the main courtyard of Zhou's house, and he can come back from time to time to live for a while. Mrs. Lu went to Suan de Guanli to count a good day for housewarming. On the 9th day of December, it happened to be a holiday, and Zhou Manguang sent an invitation. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3290. As a result of the widespread invitations, there were a lot of guests, more than the banquet where Zhou Man got married. When the genius was slightly bright, the servants in the county master's mansion got up and opened the door to see the silvery white outside. Julan and Zibing brought hot water into the room. Zhou Man was still lying on the quilt and slept soundly. Hearing the movement, he turned over gently and continued to sleep. Zibing put the water on the shelf and pushed her forward. "Miss, it snowed last night, and there are not many clouds today. It should be a sunny day." Zhou Man responded, barely opened a gap, and asked, "Are there enough people?" "It snowed last night, and it takes a lot of people to shovel snow today. West Cake, the servant will go and ask the old lady later." Zhou Man responded with a sigh, and got up after lying on the bed again. There was a lot of snow last night. At this time, the roof was plain white, The trees in the yard were piled with snow, and the grass in the flower bed was all white. Someone was shoveling the snow on the road under the trees and into the grass. Jo Man took a deep breath, and the cold but sweet breath entered her throat, but she felt very happy, and couldn't help but smile on her face. She closed the fox fur on her body and smiled happily. This snow is not bad. Zibing smiled and said, everyone said that Rugzhu is a good year, and next year's year will definitely be good. Nevertheless, keep an eye out for snow on the roof and have someone sweep it off. The biscuits should be down. Julan brought the servants up with the food box. Miss, breakfast is here, you can eat it while it's hot. Only then did Jo Man turn back to the house and ask, have grandmother, mother, and eldest sister eaten? The old lady and the lady have used it, and the little lady hasn't woken up yet. Jo Man, let her sleep. On such a cold day, she should sleep late. She can grow taller with more sleep. Jo Man lives in the main courtyard, and there are still not many servants. Apart from the main room where he lives, the wing room with the best light is converted into a study, next to Jo Man's pharmacy, the left and right side rooms, and the western cake Julan on one side. And on one side is a small room for Bai Jingxing's children. Of course, she doesn't live here, and she is more often brought by her grandmother than her mother, who can only be seen in the evening. Whether in Bihai County or the capital, she lives with the Zheng family most of the time. The county master's mansion is not small and has many yards, so you can choose to live in whatever you like. Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Zheng chose two adjacent yards, which were close to the garden and had good light. Jo Man chose a yard in the second room to be used as a library. The houses in it have been remodeled and there are rows of bookshelves. In Jo Man's small study, except for some of the books that she often used, she put all the other books in the library. In addition to the collection of books in the Bai family, there are only half of the bookshelves now, and the remaining half is still empty. Jo Man and Bai Shan said when they wrote letters that one of the goals for the rest of their lives is to fill the bookshelves. Aristocratic families use books to pass down their families. As long as there are books, it is possible to learn knowledge, and that family will be undefeated. This is what Mrs. Lu said to Jo Man when she put the books from the Bai family's collection on the bookshelf. Jo Man and the children Bai Jingxing both said they took it down. According to the regulations, the province in the palace sent the palace servants to Jo Man, most of whom were palace maids, but there were also servants. There were 18 people in total, of which there were 6 servants. Mrs. Lu didn't give Jo Man these people. In her words, I don't doubt the people sent by the province in the palace, but you are working in the palace now, and you can't help but treat your majesty and the prince, and keep these in the yard. Inconvenient. Don't use suspicious people. Since we can't fully trust them, then we don't need to, Madame Lu said. This is one of them, and the other is that neither you nor Zishan likes to use servants very much, and there are very few servants around. Little, put them in the main courtyard, you will be uncomfortable looking at them. Jo Man nodded. How is grandmother going to use them? Mrs. Lu said with a smile, I plan to keep them in the 2 yards of my mother-in-law and me. The eldest sister is also old. In addition to the maid that you put by her side, you need to add some more people. I see them. It's pretty good. The people who came out of the palace are not bad in rules and knowledge. If they bring the eldest sister, our eldest sister's rules and etiquette will not be bad in the future. Jo Man thought about it too, nodded and said, it's fine for grandmother to call the shots. So when Jo Man arrived at Mrs. Liu's yard, it was a palace maid who closed the curtain. She bowed and invited Jo Man to enter. As soon as she sat down, she bowed and exited to make tea. Mrs. Lu said, the ingredients were almost ready last night. The guests arrived around noon. When your 4th brother arrives, ask them to help welcome the guests in front. Jo Man should go. Mrs. Lu touched Jo Man's hand, and she felt relieved when she saw that her hand was warm. It's cold today, It's not good for you to go out for the wind while you are pregnant, and you have to be careful when there is snow on the road. By the way, let others look around again. Look, there are a lot of guests here today, and there are a lot of female relatives, so the snow has to be cleaned up to prevent the guests from falling. Mrs. Lu explained everything in detail. Joe Man sat with him for a while, and found that there was very little he could help. After a while, the Zheng family also came, and everyone from the Zhou family came cheering. Mrs. Lu smiled when she saw them, and entrusted the work of guarding the kitchen to Mrs. Jian, and the work of entertaining the female guests in the front was given to Zhou Lejun, as well as the arrangement of tableware and the management of servants to the sister-in-law Thursday. Zhou Man and Zheng Shi were also in charge of entertaining the female guests. Mrs. Lu pointed at Zhou Man and Zheng Shi and said, "This time Bai Shi will also have a lot of people, and Ziqian still has many people you don't know, so you can tell her when the time comes. With one finger, you don't have to be familiar with it, but at least you need to recognize someone." Zhou Man and the Zheng family responded. After everything was arranged, the county lord's mansion operated in an orderly manner. Before the guests arrived, Zhou Man sat leisurely in the study with a cup of goat milk and watched a group of children. Oh, and she doesn't need to look at it. The Zhou family has always been an older child with children, but now Wudu and Liudu play with their younger brothers, nephews, and nieces. After watching for a while, Zhou Man beckoned to call the oldest 5 and 6 over, and asked, "Where have you read now?" Wudu said, "I have finished reading Spring and Autumn." "Do you still remember the Analects of Confucius you learned earlier?" "Wudu, you can still memorize a lot, but you can't remember it completely." Zhou Man nodded. "Do you remember the name of the medicine and the recipe I asked you to memorize?" "Remember some." Zhou Man then said, "Come back and listen to me." Wudu put his hands behind his back, and Zhou Man nodded slightly. "I've been away from home these few years. Who is teaching you?" "Third sister and eldest sister-in-law. They have always asked me to memorize the names of medicines and soup recipes, and usually let me read the Huangdi Niajing at most, and the rest are gone." "Zhou Mandao, you can go to the imperial physician's office." "I will ask you again now, are you really going to be a doctor in the future?" Wudu nodded earnestly. "Of course," my parents said, "as long as I can learn my aunt's 5-point skills, I'll do it." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3291. Then get ready. I'll take you to the imperial physician's office to sign up after the new year. Wudu clenched his fists happily. He didn't want to study in the academy for a long time, but the aunt said that even if he went to study medicine, he should study hard. Zhou Man looked at Liudu and asked with a smile, "How about you?" Liudu immediately said, "Sister-in-law, I'm still young, sir, let me continue to study." Zhou Man nodded with a smile, "Then you should study hard, and strive to be admitted to Jinshi or Mingjing in the future." Seeing that his mother had been talking to his two cousins and ignored them, the little boy Bai Jingxing ran over to his mother's arms. "Mother, take us out to play." Zhou Man touched her head and smiled, "Today there will be a lot of guests at home, so I can't go out to play." "Big sister, you are the master. Today, you are going to entertain the little guests with your cousins." "Who is there?" Bai Jingxing asked enthusiastically. "Is there a little lady?" "I like to play with the little lady." "Of course there are, but there are still quite a few. When the time comes, my mother will take you there." As soon as Mei heard it, he turned around and went back to prepare. When Zhou Man was holding her hand to go to the gate to pick up the guests, Mei brought up a small cloak, put it on the little boy Bai Jingxing, and tied the rope. The small, pure white fox fur cloak was very similar to Zhou Man's. Standing together, the mother and daughter not only looked alike, but even looked alike. Joe Man looked overjoyed and couldn't help touching the fox fur. Where did this come from? Why don't I remember? Wu smiled and said, this was made by the old lady not long ago. The little lady couldn't sit still, even if it was cold and snowing, she had to go out to play, so the old lady picked 2 pieces of leather and made this for the little lady. Fox fur. In addition to this one, there are other cloaks, one of which is red, and it is very beautiful. Joe Man then said, go and get it, one white and one red will look good, we don't want to wear the same. Wu responded with a smile, turned around to get the red fox fur. Joe Man put it on her, then took her hand and went to stand at the gate. The first to arrive were Bai Er and Ming Da. The two had a good relationship with Joe Man, so they came early regardless of their high status. As soon as he got out of the car, the little boy Bai Ruyu in the black cloak broke free from his servant's hand and ran directly towards the little boy Bai Jingxing. The two of them didn't know the beauty and ugliness yet, but they only thought that the other party was dressed beautifully today, so they hugged each other and praised each other, and then they went in hand to play. Bai Jingxing wanted to introduce his cousins, nephews, and nieces to him. They are all my new friends, that's fine. Joe Man touched her head and said, okay, then as the host, bring the guests in. Mingda, it's still early for noon. The other guests shouldn't come so early. Why don't you go in with us and have a rest? It's not too early. I'll stand for a while. If I'm tired, I'll go in. Bai Erlang stood still and said, I'll accompany you and let Mingda bring the child in. Mingda smiled and nodded, and led the 2 children in. After a while Yin Or came. Joe Man said, the front yard is a little cold, there is a brazier in the backyard, you can go to the backyard. Yang Heshu and Mrs. Yang also came early, and they brought their children with them. When these close people were welcomed in, other guests came one after another. Zheng Shi and Zhou Lejun were waiting at the second gate, but Joe Man wanted to stay at the gate. No way, the guests who came today are all for Joe Man's title of county lord. Bai Shan is not at home, so she can only greet them in person. Joe Man and Bai Erlang stood at the door, smiling as they picked up one guest after another, but she just said hello, turned around and handed it over to Chu Yulang to make arrangements. When Kui Shangshu came, Joe Man made the final decision in his heart, and the guests were almost all there, so the rest was handed over to Shiro Lang, and she and Bai Erlang turned around and went back. Among the people here today, I don't know a lot of people. Your invitations are too broad, aren't they? Don't you wrong me, Joe Man said, there are many people who didn't invite me, but they are all colleagues, so I can't turn them away when everyone arrives, right? Although it is said to be widely distributed, she only sends it to some people who have friendship or have to send it. There are so many people in the civil and military affairs of the Manchu dynasty, and it is impossible for her to send it to everyone she knows. Woolen cloth. When Bai Erlang heard this, he gave a thumbs up and said, it shows how favored you are now. Joe Man ignored him. Bai Erlang, do you think your majesty will call someone to give gifts today? No, it's just a house move, it's not a marriage, and it's not a high birthday. Joe Man raised his hand and said, don't think too much. The emperor did not send anything, but the prince did. No one else arrived, but Eunuch Wu brought a lot of gifts over. Joe Man, who had not yet walked to the backyard, turned around and went to pick him up from the front. Eunuch Wu bowed and smiled, Master Joe, this is a gift carefully prepared for you by the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess. If you move to a new house, there must be a lack of decorations. These things are just right to be placed on the antique shelf. The gifts were all packed in boxes. Joe Man stretched out his hand to take the gift list and glanced at it. He tooted in his heart. Sure enough, they were all suitable for placing on the bogu shelf. Most of them were porcelain, and some were jade. The Crown Prince is really generous, but even though she just glanced at it, She could see that the things on the paper were gifts from the royal family, right? It is likely to have the palace logo on it. This kind of thing cannot generally be bought or sold, it can only be given away. The crown prince specially gave her these things this time. Mostly, His Majesty has given too many things, and they can't fit in the East Palace, right? Joe Man was thinking wildly in his heart, but with a smile on his face, he handed the gift list to Julian behind him. Just as he was about to thank him, he saw Joe Man trotting in from outside and whispered, "Manbeo, Prince Gong has come down." "Joe Man, what is he here for?" Joe Man, who felt that his relationship with Prince Gong was very ordinary, and even at odds with him, generously did not send invitations to Prince Gong, lest he would have to give her gifts when he didn't come. In previous years, Princess Gong never sent an invitation to Joe Man when she had something to do, so whether it was King Gong's birthday or a baby, Joe Man never added any gift money. In this case, she was naturally embarrassed to invite Prince Gong, but she didn't expect him to come uninvited. Joe Man glanced at Eunuch Wu, and went to the door with Joe Man in a dazed look. There was a carriage parked at the door, with guards and chamberlains standing on both sides of the carriage. Joe Man looked around and Joe Man motioned her to look at the carriage, and whispered, "It's been parked at the door, and I haven't gotten off yet." Joe Man. She could only step forward, stood beside the car and said with a smile, "Prince Gong is here, it's really full of brilliance." The maid opened the curtain, and then King Gong and Princess Gong got off the carriage. Prince Gong raised his chin in a mighty way and said, "Joe Man, do you have an opinion on this king? How come even Princess Ankang has received the post, but this king has not?" Good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3292. Joe Man was stunned for a while before returning to his senses, and hesitantly said, "It's the subordinate's fault, the post was written early, maybe it was missed when it was handed over to the subordinate, I'll go back and look for it later, it's probably still there." "In the library?" King Gong snorted coldly, feeling that Joe Man wouldn't even find an excuse. "Wouldn't it be better to just say that the servant was negligent at this time? Just call a servant over to deal with it, and both sides can pass." She actually took the guilt by herself, but she was willing to suffer, and Prince Gong naturally wouldn't stop her. Princess Gong smiled and said, "It's not a big deal, Master Joe doesn't have to take this matter to heart, my lord, let's go in." Joe Man immediately turned sideways, "Wang Ye and Wang Fei, please." Only then did Prince Gong and Princess Gong lift their feet and enter. Joe Man personally sent the people to the front yard, and Thursday Lang had already arranged the seats first, and finally did not let King Gong experience the embarrassment of not having a seat. At the same table are several honorable people of Zhaoqiagong, who are especially suitable for King Gong. Bai Erlang also rushed over and whispered to her, "Go to the backyard, leave the front yard to me, and when the time is right, I'll ask someone to invite you, just come out and toast a glass of wine." Joe Man agreed, cupped his hands and said, "Then leave it to you, junior brother, and bring my fourth brother with you. He has no fame, so don't let anyone bully him. Don't worry, today is a good day for you." Since they are here as guests, who would be so shameless? After he finished speaking, he caught a glimpse of King Gong sitting in the upper seat not far away, and Bai Erlang said, "It's not that there isn't any, I'll give it a shot." "Take back what you just said, and we'll take Brother Thursday with you carefully." Joe Man went to the backyard in peace. Bai Erlang is not cowardly, except that he is a little afraid of the emperor and the prince, he is not afraid of King Gong and other honorable people. The backyard is more lively than the front yard. The female relatives drink and enjoy the flowers. Mrs. Lu also invited actors to sing and dance. In addition to the storytellers, there are both men and women. There are also various games waiting for everyone to play. Very lively. Joe Man walked all the way, greeted people all the way, and when he found Zhang, his face would freeze with laughter. Mother and grandmother. Zhang pointed to the dining room and said, "Your grandmother is sitting on the Diaotai terrace, where she is receiving some elderly guests. Zhou Man is young, but very few of her colleagues are young. Except for Yang Heshu and Master Guo, the others invited by Zhou Man are a little older. Naturally, their wives will not be very young. They will bring their daughter-in-law and even granddaughter-in-law, but in order to show their respect for Zhou Man, they will also come in person. Moreover, Zhou Man's official position is not small now, and they are colleagues with their husbands. It is inconvenient for some social juniors to come forward, so they must come. Now these ladies are sitting with Mrs. Lu in the banquet room. When they heard the singing and the sound of the piano from outside, Mrs. Lu invited them to the theater. Our family has set up a stage outside the observation building next to the garden. You can see the stage when you sit in the garden and the observation building. Why don't we go and sit in the observation building?" The ladies responded with a hello and asked, "I don't know who is from the Jiaofang." "Miss Fenghua." A lady smiled and said, "It's still Master Zhou who has a lot of face, and he actually invited Miss Fenghua. As the new year is approaching, the Jiaofang is very busy. I heard that the palace is going to hold a big event this year, so the Jiaofang chose Miss Fenghua as the leader. Children should be busy practicing." How many Wang Sun Sungi wanted to invite Miss Fenghua to appear at this time? Mrs. Lu said with a smile, "We are lucky, just in time for today's Miss Fenghua to be free, and she can't be invited at other times. The banquet in the palace is a big event, and we don't dare to neglect it." Everyone's ears were listening to this explanation, but they didn't know what to think in their hearts. Zhou Man went around the banquet room, and then followed their trail to the observation tower. "Grandmother, I found you. Ladies and gentlemen, you should eat and drink well today, and have a good time. There is room for negligence, please also ask Hai Han." The county master Liang is joking. "I think everything is in order today. The county master is really capable. No wonder your majesty and the empress love you so much." Zhou Man hurriedly said, "This is not my credit. It all depends on my grandmother and my mother-in-law. I just sit back and enjoy it." These ladies naturally know that Zhou Man doesn't care about the back house. She is so busy with her official business. If she manages the internal affairs and can manage so well, then she is not a human being, but a god, right? But a few old ladies glanced at the actors playing on the stage and the people sitting and watching in the garden, and thought to themselves, if they have such a daughter-in-law or granddaughter-in-law who can make a fortune, they would be willing to do so, too. Run the house for her. Zhou Man joked with them for a while, confirmed that they were all doing well, and then left with a smile. When she got to the ladies of the same age below, Zhou Man felt much more at ease. She found a seat in the corridor, leaned back, and sighed deeply, "I'm really tired. I have decided not to move in my lifetime." Mingda smiled and said, "This is difficult, don't you want to travel around the world? Are you planning to stay in the capital for the rest of your life? I'm talking about no more moving house and invite housewarming wine." Zhou Man closed his eyes to rest and sighed, "It's not difficult to be a home in the world. You can travel all over the world with one horse and one pot, but the difficult thing is housewarming and entertaining guests." Mrs. Yang smiled and said, "I heard that these things are handled by your grandparents and mother-in-law for you. What have you done?" "Zhou Man, I've been entertaining guests, and I've been standing for a long time today. It's also the hard work of the county master of Yueyang." Everyone laughed for a while, and Mingda looked at the garden and said, "The scenery here is not as good as Zhou's house." Zhou Man waved his hand indifferently and said, "With my mother-in-law here, it will look good in 3 or 5 years." Zhou Man remembered something, sat up slightly, and leaned halfway towards Mingda. "I like plum blossoms, especially red plums. It's not interesting to appreciate plums in the snow. There is a multi-petaled red plum in your garden, It's not only beautiful, it also comes with a cold fragrance, which I was very envious of in previous years, but when I look back to the spring, how about you let me break a branch and plant it? Mingda smiled and said, I also think that the red plum is pretty, and I let the craftsman grow it in a pot earlier, so that it can still be enjoyed in the house. Now they can't make it smaller, but it has been cultivated in the pot for 2 years. Now, if you like it, I will give you 2 pots later, you can plant them directly in the garden, and you will be able to open them after 2 years. Joe Man was overjoyed. That's good, but I plan to plant one, you still have to give me some plum branches. Good to say, good to say. Princess Changio remembered and said, don't you love peony and chrysanthemum? I vaguely remember that you used to sell these 2 kinds of flowers in the capital, and both peonies and chrysanthemums are very good. Oh, I like the money they get more than the gorgeous and charming flowers. Joe Man smiled and said, aside from these vulgar things, I really like plum blossoms the most. Chang Yu was speechless. That's it, I was thinking of giving you a few pots of peonies because you love flowers. I love it. Joe Man immediately changed his words, peony is beautiful, how could I not love it? Send me, send me. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3293. Several people couldn't help laughing, and Chang Yu said helplessly, okay, I'll send it to you when I send it to you. She sighed and said, now I live in Xiangzhou with my concubine, and I can't take many things in the princess's house with me, and the rest are dead things, so I send someone to guard them and clean them from time to time, but the grass and trees in the garden are not. It's not easy to take care of if you can't take it away. Mingda, didn't we leave the craftsman to take care of it in the mansion? Chang Yu said angrily, they're all slackers, and no one is watching, so they slack off. This time, when I go back to the house, several pots of peonies and chrysanthemums that I raised before have all failed, and even the flowers and trees planted in the garden are not growing well. It can be seen that the mansion still has to have a master living there. Originally, I thought that if I lost, I would lose. When I return to Beijing to live for a long time in the future, I will raise it again. But since you have moved to a new house and love flowers and plants, I will give you those things. Joe Man, really? Could it be that I lied to you for a few plants? Chang Yu waved, look back and wait for me to leave soon, you can ask the craftsman to dig it. Joe Man comforted her, don't worry, I can't go wrong with these flowers and plants. Not only do I love these things in my family, but my mother-in-law also likes them very much, and she is also good at cultivating flowers and plants. When you come back to Beijing in the future, let someone come to my house to pick them up. When the time comes, I will send you a garden of flowers and plants. Chang Yu raised his eyebrows, really? My garden is full of rare grasses, and I bought them from all over the world at a huge price. Chang Yu never thought that she would leave the princess mansion to live, so she was very attentive to every plant and tree inside, even a sunflower on the rockery was carefully arranged by her. At that time, she thought very much. If the concubine was released in the future, he would release it himself. She didn't mind giving him 2 concubines to take with her, and she would also have 2 face heads at that time. The concubine took her concubine to make achievements outside, and she also took her face to live her own princess life in the capital. How comfortable! As a result, when Wei Yu finished her filial piety and was about to be released, she still wasn't willing to give him a concubine, nor was she willing to split up with him for a long time, so she could only be released with Wei Yu with a look of disgust. I also have plum blossoms and begonia flowers in my garden. It can be said that they have everything. If you like these big flowers and trees, you can transplant some of them, but you can't transplant too many. Even if I don't live, this garden can't be planted. There, otherwise it would be ugly. Seeing her so entangled, Joe Man couldn't help but said, otherwise, I will send someone to see your garden every 1 or 2 months. It's always better to take care of it often than to plant it in a hurry when you come back to live in the future, right? Mingda smiled and said, leave this to me. My house is next door. If you leave someone behind, I will send someone to check them from time to time. Forgive them and they won't dare to neglect them again. Chang Yu hugged their arms and said with a smile, then I'll leave this matter to the two of you. Fortunately, the three of us live close together now, otherwise I'd be embarrassed. Zhou Man looked incredulous, are you still embarrassed? Why can't I? My skin is also very thin. By the way, tell me quickly, there are good sea beads appearing at the Longqi wharf? I heard that there are many foreign merchants going to that place and appearing. Is it true that you have passed highs the size of a child's fist? Zhou Man accompanied her to talk for a while, and the servant came over and said, ma'am, you can sit at the table. When Zhou Man heard this, he got up immediately, let's go to the table. She was hungry, but she was pregnant now, and she felt that the snacks were not full at all, but they took up her stomach, so she did not want to eat them. Zhou Man went to invite the female guests to the table, and Mrs. Lu and others also attended the table. Seeing that Zhou Man was busy in the crowd, they called Mrs. Zheng and said, Ziqian is pregnant and can't be tired. Let her come and sit, guest. You bring Lejun to entertain you. Zhou Lejun also stopped Zhou Man and arranged for the ladies to take the seats on her behalf. Zhou Man sat next to Mrs. Lu, and then the old lady looked at Zhou Man and said, Master Zhou is pregnant. Can't see it at all. Zhou Man smiled and replied yes, it's been more than 4 months. The month is small, and it wears so much in winter. Except for the group of imperial physicians in the imperial hospital, no one in the court knew that Zhou Man was pregnant. But after today, the Manchu civil and military know all about it. Following the court together every day, you didn't even notice that anyone was pregnant. It's really a lump of elm wood. Don't say that Mr. Zhou is a woman, he is a man. I can't stare at people's stomachs, can I? And I see that Mrs. Zhou is as usual, moving with the wind, and I can't see the weakness of pregnancy at all. How do I know she is pregnant? Already. Even the emperor knew from Gu Zhong's gossip, Zhou Man is pregnant? Isn't that? Gu Zhong smiled and said, that's right, Master Zhou was nearly 2 months pregnant when he returned to Beijing. The emperor couldn't help but sigh, she worked hard for her during that time. When she has a baby, give her an extra month, no, half a month off. Gu Zhong smiled and wrote it down. The emperor asked, how is Bihai County now? I haven't heard any news. Would you like to ask the Ministry of Officials, Your Majesty? At the end of the year, the official assessment is recorded in the Ministry of Personnel. The emperor said, Bai Shan's evaluation must be top-notch, what can we check? The emperor knocked on the table, thinking thoughtfully, he has stayed in Bihai County long enough. Gu Zhong stepped aside, did not interrupt, let the emperor talk to himself. The emperor didn't need him to talk, he just needed someone to listen. After the housewarming day, Zhou Man received preferential treatment when she went to court again. At the court meeting, her cushion was thicker than others. Sitting down was very different from the previous feeling. During the Xiaoqiao meeting, the cushions in the study were changed to low stools. She didn't have to sit cross-legged respectfully. She covered her legs with an official robe, and no one could see that her legs were crossed on the ground, so she was very comfortable. Zhou Man did not expect that pregnancy would have such benefits, so he was overjoyed, and quietly said to Xiao Yuan, if I had known that there was such preferential treatment, I should have announced that I was pregnant earlier. Xiao Yuan Zheng ignored her words and handed her a list directly, this is the final list, take a look at it, there is no problem, after the end of the Yuan festival, let them set off for the border. The emperor and the Ministry of War wanted to send military doctors to the military camp quickly, but the imperial physician's office had been entangled in solving the problems of the military doctor's rank treatment and promotion, so it had been delayed. Until now, things have been resolved, and the imperial physician's office has determined the list. Zhou Man looked at it and found that they were all male students, so he asked, "Have you asked them all?" "I asked, and they went there voluntarily." Zhou Man nodded and asked thoughtfully, "Are there any female students willing to go there?" Xiao Yuanzhang said, "There are a few, but I was persuaded to withdraw." Zhou Man looked up at him. Xiao Yuanzhang said, "Military doctors also have to go to the battlefield. They have no eyes for swords and guns, and they have to carry wounded soldiers. Most of the work they do is dismantling arms and legs. Female students are not as easy to use as male students." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3294. Zhou Man nodded slightly and asked, "We are going to recruit new students in the spring, are you ready for the exam?" Just about to talk to Lord Zhou, Xiao Yuanzhang said, "You will also get a copy of the test questions. At that time, each imperial doctor will pick out a few questions and mix them up." "Zhou Man, I can't do it. I have a nephew to take the test this year, so I have to avoid suspicion." Xiao Yuanzhang waved his hand and said, "No, every year there are relatives of imperial physicians who take the test, and they have to avoid suspicion. There are no people who even asked for the test." He said generously, "You can write the questions, we will choose the mixed questions when the time comes. Not to mention that Master Zhou won't leak the test questions, even if they leak, he can pass the test." Zhou Man raised his eyebrows, thinking about it really, medical skills are not like others, and the exam questions are not just paperwork. When Zhou Man went back, she started to think about the question. She walked while thinking about it, and when she had a clue, she looked up and went to the wrong place. Zhou Man looked around and had to ask Daji, "Where is this place?" "Daji, this is the northwest corner, turn right ahead and walk straight to the garden." Seeing that the courtyard doors were locked, Zhou Man turned around and said, "The house is too big, by the way, I went astray, why didn't you call me just now?" "Daji, I called, but the lady didn't hear it. I can't disturb your thoughts." Zhou Man sighed, looked up at the sky sadly and said, "Looking at the gray sky, it looks like it's going to snow again tonight, and I don't know what Bai Shan is doing. This year, he's going to celebrate the New Year alone." Daji, he didn't understand why he suddenly mentioned the master, but he was used to it, so he listened quietly. "Zhou Mandao, do you want me to let a few people over to accompany him for the New Year?" Daji had a bad premonition in his heart, and quickly said, "My lady is right, I haven't celebrated Chinese New Year with my wife and children for many years." It was only then that Zhou Man remembered, "Yes, Daji, I will give you a long holiday this year for the Chinese New Year. Shuping can't come back when he is an official out of town. Is Bowen still in the security guard? We should be able to reunite." Zhou Man originally wanted Daji to send something to Bai Shan and accompany Bai Shan in Bihai County for the New Year. If Daji couldn't go, it would be the same who sent things. After all, Daji grew up with them, and the other servants were just servants. Zhou Man finally returned to the main courtyard, leaning on the table with his chin and thinking, what should he give Bai Shan to accompany him to celebrate the New Year so that he won't be too lonely? She really couldn't think of it, so she could only suppress the matter and write the test questions first. In the evening, it snowed heavily. Zhou Man lay on the bed, listening to the rustling voice outside, only felt that the days of lying in the bed were very happy. The next day, she was awakened by the sound of snowballs hitting the window. Julan heard the movement, pushed the door open, and said with a smile, "Miss, you woke up so late today, the little lady has come to play. Joe Man got up and put on his clothes and cloak to go out to sea, and saw Bai Jingxing's little boy jumping around in the snow dressed like a ball. His little hands were red from freezing, but he couldn't help but grab the snow, grab a handful and press the button. When she pressed it, she threw it at the servants who were playing with her. People ran to dodge, some dodged, some didn't. Snowballs hit people's backs, stomachs, and even their faces. All over the yard, there was only the laughter of Bai Jingxing's children. Joe Man closed up his cloak, stepped forward and asked the servants who were dodging, "Why don't you just run away and not throw them back?" Except for May, they knelt down and hula-la, ignoring the snow on the ground, with their foreheads pressed against the snow. Slave dare not. Joe Man was stunned for a moment, hurriedly stepped forward to help them up, frowned and asked, "If you answer, then answer, why are you kneeling?" The people lowered their heads and stood up. Joe Man looked around at them. "Are you sent from the palace of the palace?" "Yes." Joe Man nodded and said to them, "Just wait by the side. In May, go and call some little girls and let them play snowball fights with the eldest sister." "May, yes. I went to pick 3 little girls over in May, all of whom had just entered the house last year and this year and gave birth to children. One was 9 years old, one was 10 years old, and the other was 12 years old. They were called into the yard, holding snowballs and fighting with the children of Bai Jingxing." Bai Jingxing laughed even louder. She was happy when the snowball hit her, and she was even happier when she was hit by the snowball. The whole yard was filled with her laughter. After Joe Man washed up, he sat in the room with the door open to eat a hot breakfast, watching them play while eating. When the little boy Bai Jingxing was tired from playing, Joe Man waved and called someone into the room, "Wash her hands and change her clothes." "Yes." The little boy Bai Jingxing who changed his clothes was hugged and sat down beside Joe Man. Joe Man poured her a bowl of meat porridge and said, "Do you want to eat?" Bai Jingxing had eaten too early, but after playing for so long, she was also hungry and immediately dragged the bowl to eat by herself. Joe Man asked her, "When the new year is over, you should go to school. You don't need to learn much, you should play as the main thing, but you also need to recognize some words. Whether it is playing or reading, you can learn fast if you have a partner around you. Do you have to pick two? A little girl with you, or with your cousins, nieces, and nephews?" The little boy Bai Jingxing asked, "What about Big Bauer?" "Joe Mandeo, I'll go back and ask for you." Bai Jingxing thought for a while and then said, "I don't want a girl anymore, I have a lot of girls, so I can go with my cousin, niece, and nephew." Joe Man nodded, and then pointed to the servant waiting outside, "Since you don't need playmates, then when you want to play in the future, when your friends are not around, you can play with them. But you have to remember that you come to me to play. Go, like playing snowballs, if you hit someone else will hit you back, that's called playing. You hit someone and others don't dare to fight back, that's called abuse, you know." Little Bai Jingxing listened in a daze, and said, "I want them to play with me." Joe Man smiled and touched her head, "Mother knows, but they are afraid of you now and don't dare to play with you. Our eldest sister is a considerate person, so don't force them to play with you, okay? When you play, you also need to find the right partner, so that you can be happy and others will be happy too." The little boy Bai Jingxing thought for a while and said, "Want to find someone who dares to beat me to play with." "Joe Man, it's true to say that, but there's no need to play with someone who beats you, you can." Joe Man herself said that she was in a mess. After a pause, she took her daughter out and pointed in one direction, "Do you know who lives in that yard?" "Yes, Shizu. Father and mother's teacher." "It's really smart," Joe Man said. "You usually go there to play with the master when you have nothing to do. My mother doesn't speak well about things like logic, so you go ask the master." Julian couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Miss, if you can't teach the little lady well, you will push it to Mr. Zhuang. If Mr. Zhuang finds out. Zhou Man hissed, if you don't say it, I won't say it, who knows. Julan motioned her to look at the people standing in and out of the yard. Zhou Man paused and said, no one said anything. Good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3295. After the Chinese New Year, not only Zhou Man, but Mingda was also busy, so he didn't have time to take the children. Zhou Man found a vacant yard in his home and called all the children of Zhou's family who were underage to go to school to study with the two children, Bai Jingxing and Bai Ruyu. Speaking of reading, 3 of the 4 hours a day are playing. Every morning, MRSGN brought the Zhou family's children, and in the evening, MRS Zheng taught them some poems, and occasionally painted and played the piano for them. The palace maids given by the province in the palace are of great use. They are not only full of etiquette, but also literate. They are led by them. According to Xiao Qian, the old Zhou has been brought back a lot by the children. When the spring plowing day arrived, and the imperial court put the fields on holiday, Zhou Man sorted out today's pulse case and sealed it up. There are quite a few busy imperial physicians in the imperial hospital. Seeing this, they asked, Master Zhou has gone to the yamen. Zhou Man nodded, my work is done. Everyone looked at her enviously. Don't look at it, if you can check all the official documents in your hands like her in 1 hour, you can also go to the office on time. Imperial physician Lu floated past them, slapped a note on one's table, and said, Dr. He, you are on duty in the palace tonight. He Guangbei immediately got up and responded, yes. When an imperial doctor heard it, he immediately went to him with the official documents in his hand. He imperial doctor, the long night in the palace, sitting idle is boring, why don't you help me deal with these official documents? Others also went to him with the official documents in their hands. He Guangbei resigned helplessly, I don't dare to accept it. What if there is a delay in seeking a doctor in the palace? Imperial physician Lu frowned and looked at them displeasedly, I've dealt with my own affairs, what's the point of pushing it to someone who has only been in the imperial physician for a few years? Dr. Lu, don't you suffer from it too? We used to only need to see a doctor and prescribe it. It's not difficult to write pulse records and organize case data, but now I have to wait for the cost of applying for the list of medicinal materials in various places. Not a clerk of the household department, calculating an account is more tiring than seeing 100 patients. Yeah, we are all old. We can't compare to Taihe and the others. They are young and smart. The able ones work harder. We can share their patience. You, Imperial Physician Zhou. Imperial Physician Lu looked behind them, and everyone turned their heads. Seeing Zhou Man who had left and returned, they immediately lowered their heads and took back the official documents in their hands. Imperial Physician Lu stared, when did Zhou Man gain such prestige in the Imperial Hospital? Isn't everyone more afraid of him before? He Guangbei's expression changed slightly, and he stood with his head down, Sir. The students who came out of the Imperial Physician's office, especially the classes that Zhou Man had taken, were more accustomed to being called Mr. Zhou Man rather than Lord Zhou. I forgot to bring some documents, come back and get them. Zhou Man glanced at the documents in their hands, frowning slightly, what are these documents? Seeing her stretch out her hand, an older imperial doctor next to her put the official document in her hand and complained in a low voice, this is the official document of the Tangzhou Medical Office's consumption of medicinal materials last year, as well as the list of medicinal materials and budget that I applied for this year. Let the lower officials check the amount that should be given this year according to the consumption of the previous year. Zhou Imperial Doctor, I am this age, and I am not a household clerk, how do you know how to calculate this? Zhou Man flipped through it and closed it, who gave it to you? This is the job of the Imperial Physician's office, not within the scope of the Imperial Physician's responsibilities, and this thing has already been done. It was all done this year, and in the spring, it only needs to be checked and then distributed to the state medical offices to buy the money. The other imperial physicians looked at each other, stepped forward and saluted. Xiao Yuan is asking us to check. As soon as Zhou Man heard it, he returned the official document to him, then check it out. Physicians. Zhou Man went to the office to get the information he wanted, and left with the medicine box. Everyone watched her off again. This time, an imperial doctor went to the door to see her. She turned around and said, "Let's go." "Oh, I thought Lord Zhou would help us get ahead." "Don't think about it, Master Zhou and the court are just fit enough to wear a pair of pants, how can they go against the court's words?" Zhou Man really wouldn't go against Xiao Yuanzheng's words, but she was also curious about why Xiao Yuanzheng did this, so she didn't leave after leaving the palace, but went to the imperial physician's office. The officials in the imperial physician's office were even busier. Even though it was time for the Xiaoya, the officials were still too busy to touch the ground. Zhou Man went all the way into his office, and next door was Lord Luo's office. He accumulated a lot of money on his desk. The official document, the door was open, and occasionally when he looked up, he saw Zhou Man passing by his door. He immediately chased out with a pen in his hand. "Master Zhou, can the medical department of Hedong Road deliver it?" Zhou Man nodded and said, "It's delivered, I have asked someone to check it, it has been put into storage, and it can be sent out after the field holiday." "It's this time of year, what field leave is there?" Master Luo said. "I think the weather is good today. If Master Zhou is free, send it today, so that the states and counties can just receive it after the field holiday ends." Zhou Man glanced at the time and frowned, "In such a hurry?" "Don't be in a hurry, I just received the Huainan Daojizi from Zhongsha province, saying that the epidemic situation in Huainan is very serious, there are many people with typhoid fever, and the mortality rate is still high. I asked the Imperial Physician's office to send a senior Imperial Physician to check it out, and be sure to bring a batch of medicinal materials for relief there, it's very busy. It was a cold spring some time ago, and it is indeed easy to catch the cold." "I know it, and I will go to send silver in a while." Zhou Man glanced at the pen in his hand and reminded, "Master Luo, the ink on your pen is about to dry." It was only then that Master Luo remembered that he was still holding a pen in his hand, and he hurriedly turned around and went back. Zhou Man thought for a while, but still went to Xiao Yuanzheng. Xiao Yuanzheng was also busy, so he took the time to look up at her and then lowered his head. "If you have something to say, just say it." "Why did the hospital hand over the official documents that have been processed to the imperial physicians of the imperial hospital to be processed again?" "Choose a person," Xiao Yuanzheng said, "there is a shortage of people in the imperial physician's office." Zhou Man touched his chin and said, "The Jinshi exam has passed, and it won't be long before the civil service exam. Did the academy think about selecting some talented people?" "Xiao Yuanzheng, they don't understand medical and medicinal materials. We don't care about the price of medicines. The prescription must be checked, and non-medical people can't do it. Zhou Mandao, the drug list can be fixed. We will work harder in the early stage to determine the applicable and free drug list for each program, and they will not make mistakes. Xiao Yuanzheng, if there is an increase or decrease. Approval for a fixed period of time, or 1 year, or 2 years, to reformulate the drug list. Xiao Yuanzheng, in this way, the workload will be piled up on the few of us. Zhou Mandao, it's a waste of manpower to select people from the Taiyuan hospital like this now. Isn't the extra work allocated to us in the end?" Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3296. Xiao Yuanzheng felt that he didn't count Zhou Man in these matters, so he nodded and said, "Okay, then I'll tell the Ministry of Personnel and choose a few people at that time." Zhou Man nodded. The selection of techniques and official documents are well written. Xiao Yuanzheng looked at her and expressed understanding. Xiao Yuanzheng glanced at her big belly. Okay, you can go after you finish your official business. Zhou Man shook his head. I'll send money to Hedong Road. Xiao Yuan is frowning. Didn't you take the leave and send it back again? Zhou Man explained Lord Luo's concerns, and said worriedly, typhoid fever, I don't know what medicine they use. Xiao Yuanzheng, you can go to Lord Luo to take a look at the book in a while to see if there is a pulse case attached. Xiao Yuanzheng nodded. If there is, I will transcribe a copy and send it to your house, and you can find the right medicine. Zhou Man responded and turned around to find someone to send some money. When she got everything done, it was getting dark outside, and Zhou Man walked out of the imperial physician's office with his stomach. Daji hurriedly stretched out his hand to help her onto the carriage, and took out a paper bag from his arms. Miss, let's use a cake first. Zhou Man took it and found that it was still warm, so he peeled it off and took a bite. He let out a long sigh and said, I'm finally done. I'll be on vacation tomorrow, so I don't have to enter the palace. Back at the county master's mansion, Bai Jingxing's children were about to go to sleep. When she heard her mother came back, she came over with a palace lantern by herself. Mother, I'm going to fall asleep before you come back. When Zhou Man saw the glazed palace lantern she was holding, he waved his hand and smiled, come out again to show off the palace lantern that your father gave you. Bai Jingxing turned the lamp in his hand and smiled. Zhou Man reached out and touched her head and said, are you going to stay and sleep with your mother tonight? Bai Jingxing's eyes brightened, he nodded repeatedly, okay, okay. Mei hurriedly said, my lady, you are old now, in case a little lady kicks you. Zhou Man raised his hand to suppress her words and smiled, it doesn't matter, I have my own measure. Bai Jingxing climbed onto the bed with a happy face and waited for his mother. Zhou Man smiled, washed after dinner, and told her a story with Bai Shan's little book before laying down to sleep. Zhou Man touched her flushed face and closed his eyes. Zheng Shi heard that Bai Jingxing slept with Zhou Man at night, and was worried that she would kick Zhou Man, so she rushed over early in the morning. The mother and daughter were still lying on the bed and refused to get up. Ms. Zheng stood outside the window and listened, heaving a sigh of relief, turned her head and instructed, let the kitchen prepare some hot porridge. Hard stuff. Yes. When Zhou Man woke up when he heard the movement, Zheng Shi and the girls went in together. Seeing that Bai Jingxing was still soundly asleep, he asked with a smile, she didn't bother you at night, did she? No, Zhou Man said with a smile, we divided 2 quilts, and it was cold at night, so she just tossed in her own quilt. Ms. Zheng sat by the bed and watched Bai Jingxing for a while, touched her face, and whispered, she misses you, she has been talking about it for the past few days, saying that my mother went out too early in the morning, she would not come back at noon, and she would not come back in the evening. No one was seen. Zhou Man felt a little guilty, there are so many things to do in the spring, this time is too busy. In the past, except in the morning, she would come back for lunch at noon, and she could take a nap with her. In the afternoon, she would come back early in the afternoon, and she could take her to the street to play. Zheng Shi took Zhou Man's hand and said, no matter how busy you are, you should pay attention to rest. Humans are flesh, not iron. How can you be so wasteful? Besides, you are still pregnant. Zhou Man touched his stomach and nodded, I know, don't worry, mother, I have put down a lot of things recently. Zheng Shi didn't believe it, except for not being on duty at night, I really don't see where you put it down. She temporarily suspended classes in the classroom, and even slowed down the writing of medical books. She has already let go of many things. However, it was not easy to tell Zheng Shi, so she tried her best to turn her head and finally found it, this time I was on vacation for 10 days, and I was not on duty at the Taiyuan Hospital and the Imperial Physician's office. When I came back yesterday, the imperial physician's office was still on duty. Someone, they're much busier than me. Zhou Mandao, your majesty and Xiao Yuan Zheng have taken good care of me, really. Okay, you just know what you have in mind, Zheng asked. Didn't the court set maternity leave for female officials? When are you on vacation? Zhou Mandao, wait a few more months. Zheng Shi, you will give birth in 2 months. Then wait for another month. In a month, the busyness of the Imperial Medical Office and the Imperial Hospital has come to an end. Zhou Man has field leave, and the Zhou family's children naturally have them, so they didn't come to the county master's mansion today. I heard that they were taken to Pu village by the old Zhou Tou, and they were thrown into the fields to work. Of course, a few-year-old baby can't do much work, so he helps to transport some grass, hand over a seedling and so on. But Bairu had no field leave, so early in the morning he knocked on the back door of the county master's mansion. After knocking, he led a group of servants to rush in and went straight to Bai Jingxing's yard. Little Lang Jun, our little lady is in the main courtyard. Bairu rushed to the main courtyard and finished what his mother asked him to pass on in one breath. Auntie, my mother invited you to go to the academy to play together, and said that after finishing the academy, you will go to the newly opened Judatang for dinner, and you will have to eat in the afternoon. Go buy pen, ink, and paper for my sister and I. Seeing that he didn't catch his breath, Zhou Man couldn't help laughing. How come you have such a good memory that you can remember such a long paragraph? Bairu proudly raised her head. Zhou Man turned his head to the servant behind him and said, Go and tell the princess, I'll see you at the intersection in a quarter of an hour. The next person walked away. The women's school that Mingda and the crown princess were going to started recruiting students this year. The academy was deliberately chosen on the same street as the Imperial College, which was also on the same street as the Imperial Physician's office. The Queen personally came forward and bought the mansion and garden there, and the 2 mansions became a female school in one place. The place is not small, although Zhou Man has not gone in to see it, but he heard Mingda mention that it is more spacious than their Imperial Physician's office. However, the number of students they recruited this year was only 64, and 30 of them were from small households and were admitted to women's schools. The remaining 34 people are daughters or granddaughters of officials in the DPRK, daughters of noble families, none of them. Although the influence of the aristocratic family is not comparable to that of the previous years, in the hearts of the folk scholars, the aristocratic family is still the trend, so no family daughter has been recruited, which makes the crown princess and Mingda a little anxious. Zhou Man didn't feel in a hurry, he held his stomach and straightened his back slightly, and let Zibing put a pillow behind her and then said, There is no distinction between teaching and learning. Anyway, you are not running a school for fame and fortune, but to make more. There are many women who read well, and they are all women. The daughters of noble families are women, the daughters of noble officials are also women, and the daughters of commoners are also women, so who is not to teach? Zhou Mandao, the flowers are fragrant and the butterflies come spontaneously. The same is true for your girls' school. If you do it well, why don't you receive it? Mingda's restless heart calmed down. You help me take a good look at what's missing in my studies this time. Zhou Man took a bite. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3297. The princess named the female school Ming Shui. Zhou Man got out of the car, raised his head to look at the plaque, and praised, This word is excellent. It was written by Kong Jiju, Mingda said. Actually, the word Ming was also suggested by Kong Jiju. Zhou Man envied, It's good, the plaque of our Imperial Physician's office was written by His Majesty. Mingda pursed his lips and said with a smile, Kong Jiju's words are indeed better than those of the Emperor. The word is good, and the meaning is good, Zhou Man said, Ming, Zhao is also, and it is called Ming. The Book of Rites also says that the way of the university is bright and virtuous. I remember that Kong Jiju said that the husband is written by the micro, and the to the extreme, the light is reflected in the four expressions, which means that Ming Ming is in the world. Kong Jiju chose this word for the female school, and it seems that there are great expectations. Minda nodded proudly. If the aristocratic family is the wind direction of the scholars in the world, then Kong Jiju is the light in the wind direction. If he can get the word of him, Mingda feels that no matter what the future of the female school is, it will not be a waste of her thoughts. Come on, go in, and have a look. The door opened, Bai Jingxing and Bairu Yu ran in first, and the adults followed behind. The entrance was divided into several paths, and the flowers and trees were prosperous inside. Because it was the time of spring, not only the peonies, peaches, and plums were in full bloom, but also there are unknown wildflowers blooming in the grass, but they are well kept. As expected of a woman's school, Bijou is the scent of medicine, and the flower bed is also occupied by the imperial physician's office, which is too beautiful to grow medicine. There are few students now, and there are not many places used, so only a part is open for the time being, Mingda showed her. This is the piano room, where students are taught to play the piano. Zhou Man looked in from the window and asked with a wow, you bought all these pianos? Mingda nodded, yes, it costs a lot. I haven't started riding and archery lessons yet, and I have to buy horses and bows later. These expenses are also a lot. Zhou Man gave her a thumbs up and asked, do you need me to support one or two? Mingda winked at her and said meaningfully, if you want, I will naturally not stop it. There will be more places where women's school needs to spend money in the future. Oh, Zhou Man understood, you guys are trying to raise money from us. Mingda said, it's too early to mention this at this time, let's wait for it to grow. Zhou Man said to her with a serious look, it will definitely grow. Mingda also thinks so. The queen mother and sister-in-law in the palace are very trusting in female officials, and there are even unfavorable concubines who ask themselves to be female officials, so I think women will have great achievements in the future, and natural women's studies will also have great achievements. Wow, who is so powerful? Mingda said with a smile, it's just a talented person. Courage is commendable, but not so powerful, at least not as good as you. Mingda took her to the next door to see, and said, this is the tea room, and the next two courtyards are the housekeepers. They all live in the school when they go to school. Like your imperial physician's office, they take 2 days off every 10 days. It's the same as the court's rest day. Yes. Where did you get it, sir? I was just about to tell you, Mingda said, Mr. invited from all over the world, but there are few famous ones. Years ago, I always asked Kong to sacrifice wine to help invite famous teachers, but they don't want to come. Mingda nodded, looked at Zhou Man and said, I want to invite you to be a gentleman. Zhou Man, you think I'm still free now? She snapped her fingers and said, there are a lot of things in the imperial physician's office. I also need to see a doctor at the imperial physician's office, and I also need to repair medical books. From time to time, I have to go to the imperial physician's office to take some classes. If you find me a job, why don't I split it in half and use it separately? Mingda smiled and said, I'm not asking you to take classes every day, just like you are taking classes at the imperial physician's office. What's that called? Yes, a special class, one topic at a time, one reason. It doesn't matter when you come, as long as you have how about you come over and talk about it. Zhou Man, since it's not a fixed course, the courses I teach may be repeated with other gentlemen. Why is this necessary? Mingda said, everyone has a different opinion on the same sentence. I want them to hear your opinion. Of course, there is another reason, she said, you are the only female official in the current Great Court. If you come, I will be considered a famous teacher in Mingxiu. Maybe you can use your name to attract more teachers. Many famous teachers. Joe Man looked suspicious. Me? How is this possible? This is not teaching medicine, how can I be famous? Yes, yes, Mingda said with a smile, it has always been said that you grew up reading the scriptures in Shizuji, and you were taught as a man since you were a child. If you are a member of the Baizishan Association, you will. Joe Man touched his chin in thought, so I borrowed Bai Shan's light. Bai Erlang, who has been playing with the two children, immediately raised his head and said, and mine. He shook his head and said proudly, you're stuck in the middle of the court now, you mustn't know what's going on outside, right? What's changing? It's clearly a rumor, Joe Man knew him best, but asked, tell me, what rumors are there in the tea house? Bai Erlang smiled and said, I said that our teacher is amazing, and he has accepted 3 disciples in his life, all of them are extraordinary. Bai Shan and I were admitted to the Jinchi examination at a young age. You Joe Man are even more famous all over the world. As the direct disciple of the scholar, you must have also studied the classics and history, and you are no worse than others. Mingda, don't listen to him, you have a good reputation outside, and you think that since you are Bai Shan and his senior sister, then your Wenzi should not be under the 2 of them, so you are really famous among the literati. How about you, bring it on. Joe Man rolled his eyes and said, if I can come, can other ladies also come? She said, let's talk, you have so many classes here, and you take up everything in piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting. For example, my mother-in-law, her painting skills and piano skills are very good, she can come over and give them a class occasionally. Tang Suiseo, law school excellent, Mrs. Yang Shui, her handwriting is very strong, and it is not inferior to Brother Yang. If Brother Yang can come to a class, the female students who will be attracted? Joe Man looked at Mingda. Mingda's eyes brightened, it may not be able to attract students, but teachers can definitely be attracted. And the ladies in the palace, Joe Man said, they can also come out from time to give the students a special class, and those who can be concubines in the palace, even if they don't have a skill, they must have their own uniqueness to the classics and history. Fan opinions, why not invite them? Mingda didn't expect Joe Man to be so courageous that he even dared to invite concubines. I'm really ashamed of myself, you dare to invite even concubines in the palace. Actually, I would like to suggest that you invite Master Tang, Kui Shangshu, and the others, Joe Man said. In terms of knowledge, who can compare with them? If you can invite them to teach a class or 2, then the students will definitely benefit a lot. Sure enough, there is no boldest, only bigger. But, Mingda is still seriously thinking about the possibility. Good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3298. It's not easy to invite. Mingda thought, even in the Imperial College, it is difficult to invite a few elders to give lectures, not to mention that our Mingxiu is a women's school. Bai Erlang and Joe Man looked at each other and gave her an idea together, Su Zai. With favor. But what kind of relationship do I have with them? Mingda looked at Joe Man, in terms of friendship with them, I can't compare to you. Joe Man's yes sounded, and he thought about it seriously, and finally shook his head and said, no, I can't invite them because of my favor. Why don't you try to invite Zhao Qiagong first? Bai Erlang nodded again and again, yes, yes, please invite Zhao Qiagong first. Once there is a precedent, you can invite him later. Mingda thought about it, if she went to roll in front of her uncle, could her uncle come to teach a class to the students of her women's school? I'll try it back, let's go, let's take the 2 of them out for a walk. Students from the Imperial College, the Imperial Physician's Office, and various academies have all taken field leave, so there are particularly many students in the nearby streets. As soon as Joe Man and the three led their two children into the bookstore, they were startled by the crowd moving inside. Then Mingda said with a look of relief, "Look, my Dajin students are eager to learn, and their studies are prosperous. In the future, our women's school will also have a place." The voice just fell, and three scholars pushed their hands to the counter, arguing, "I saw this first." "What do you see first? I also said that I saw it first, and I caught it first. Buying books should be based on whoever comes first. I'll pay double the price, the shopkeeper, sell it to me. You look down on anyone, I triple it. I don't want to go out. The first thing I get in my hand is to buy it at the normal price." The shopkeeper, "Do you keep your word?" A scholar next to him couldn't help but ask, "What book is so precious?" "The White Consort's Journey to the West is the last one." "The bookstore is also true. I know this book is easy to sell, why is it printed so little?" "Don't mention it, I heard that the concubines' books are now printed by the bookstore in the Princess Mansion. The concubines' books are easy to sell, and as soon as they are printed, there are a lot of booksellers picking up, and few of them land in the capital. Booksellers can't get the goods from the bookstore, so they buy it from the bookstore and ship it out, so there are fewer books." Joe Man and Mingda turned to look at Bai Erlang together. Bai Erlang's face was bright, he held back his smile and said, "I really want to learn." Joe Man gave a tisk, patted the little heads of the two children and said, "Go and choose the pen you want." The two immediately ran on short legs, and the servants quickly followed. Joe Man looked left and right, and looked at the books in the bookstore greedily. "There are still many empty bookshelves in my library." "You still have time to read the idle books outside," Bai Erlang said. "Didn't you say that buying books without reading is the same as not buying them?" "What do you know? If I don't read it now, it doesn't mean I won't read it in the future. If I don't read it, it doesn't mean the children won't read it," Joe Man said. "Looking at the shortage of books right now, you should buy them when you buy them." Joe Man stepped forward and called the guy to ask, "What new book has been published recently?" The guy is new here and didn't recognize Joe Man, so he said directly, "Recently, the White Concubine has released a new book of nautical charts, which tells the story of a young man's adventures at sea. We sold it very well, madam. Do you want to read it? Look. The shopkeeper over there just broke the lawsuit of the three scholars." As soon as he looked up and saw Joe Man, he immediately greeted him, "Why is Mr. Joe here? Please come in. Recently, there is a Yushao poetry collection sent from the southern area of Gansu. What do you want? Don't look at it." He turned his head and said to the young man, "This is Lord Joe of the Imperial Physician's office. She is the senior sister of the White Concubine. If you still have his book, Lord Joe, don't introduce it randomly." Bai Erlang and Mingda came over, and the shopkeeper was even more surprised to see Bai Erlang. He didn't pay attention to Mingda at all. He left Joe Man and grabbed Bai Erlang. "Consort! Consort!" When the book buyers heard it, they turned their heads to look at them, and immediately squeezed in, "Are you the White Concubine?" "My concubine, I wonder if there is a reprint of Journey to the West." Yeah, we can't buy this book, why don't we print some more?" "Actually, I think Westward Journey can be written again, such as how the cowpox was finally planted bit by bit." "How did it come out? Don't you have acne?" "I planted it, but I didn't have much risk when I vaccinated, but the first batch of people to try it must be very dangerous, and they don't know their life or death. Isn't it worth writing about them with such courage? I want to know more about the details of Gao Chang's war, I can write more about it." Frightened by their enthusiasm, Bai Erlang stepped back again, and a scholar found it and hurriedly said, "Let's not talk about the content of the book, Bai Concubine, I have a copy of Journey to the West in my hand. Then give a line of words to a certain question. It's so shameless, why should the White Concubine write you an inscription?" If there are so many of us who have never bought the White Concubine's book, can we all let him inscribe it? Yes, yes, no question. Bai Erlang stepped back again and again, his eyes swept over Mingda and Zhou Man who were squeezed behind, for fear that they would have an accident. He hurriedly turned around and left the store and took away a wave of people. Thank you for your love, the inscription is unnecessary. Everyone chased after Bai Erlang and went out, and other people in the store who didn't have that kind of mind saw them and went out too. The store was completely empty, leaving only Zhou Man and Mingda. Zibing and Julan supported Zhou Man and put their hands in front of her belly. Seeing everyone leaving, they breathed a sigh of relief. Scared us to death. Zhou Man looked at the stunned shopkeeper and pulled Mingda, let's buy it another day. Mingda returned to God, okay. Immediately greet people and leave with 2 children in their arms. The shopkeeper returned to his senses, chased him out, looked at Zhou Man Mingda who went to the left, and then looked at the scholars who were chasing Bai Erlang to the right. He couldn't help but wave to the right. Lang Jun, do you still want the book you selected? Already. Bai Erlang took the 2 servants to run for a long time before getting rid of the people behind him. By the time of Zhu Datang, he had run away. Seeing him running into the box, Mingda immediately poured him a cup of tea. How long have you been running? Bai Erlang stretched out 2 fingers, 3 streets. Mingda looked at the 2 fingers he stretched out, and couldn't help but pull out another one, and he felt relieved when he collected 3 fingers. Bai Erlang retracted his hand, exhaled and sighed, I didn't expect that I am so famous now. It's strange that I don't see anyone blocking me every day at the government office. Zhou Man, everyone is so busy on weekdays, not always as busy as today. I don't care what you say, anyway, I'm famous. It seems that there are more people who admire me than you and Bai Erlang became happy, it even looks like more than Yang Shuexiang.